Coming to you straight from the Rio Grande and beyond. Broadcasting to the four corners of the globe. So grab your seat, your coffee, or your sundowner.
Okay, everybody, here we go.
On point, as always. This is Gloves Off. Gloves Off.
So when I was working on Selena, the series for Netflix, to play the role of Abraham Quintanilla, I put on a specific amount of weight, which I was fine doing, but also realizing it could be difficult to get that weight off. I got back into my physical regimen with James Leha, but I was still having trouble with just those last amounts. And that's when I got to meet Arturo from Laredo Medical Weight Loss Clinic. And just the products that he gave me kind of put me over the edge. I feel great about myself.
Back at you in Gloves Off, and today we have a great guest, Dr. Petra Dexter, and we're going to touch base on the aftermath of parental alienation and what happens when the kids age out and grow up and there's no more conflict. How are we doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming back on board, and thank you for always educating us on the issues of parental alienation, because it's something that's pretty bad. Thank you for that.
Well, it's something that affects a lot of people, and people don't realize that, right? And
Absolutely.
It's kind of important.
It's a social problem.
Right. Yeah, it's a very widespread problem.
Explain to us a little bit about what occurs in parental alienation, and after kids age out, what occurs. What are the common things that happen?
Right. So, parental alienation. So when the kids are younger, right, you have a little bit of a, not a lot. Sometimes it's effective, sometimes it's not, but you have a little bit of the power of the court system, right? So the children are still under the court ruling in a way. They are still dependent, so that the court can have some say into how the children can be raised, so that you could then try to interfere and navigate the alienation situation by going to court and trying to influence that. But once the kids age out, right, they reach 18, they become an adult, they are no longer, they're now full-grown adults according to the law. They are no longer within the system as such, so you can't go to court and try to fight with your ex, the alienator, of the kids in the court system that way. So now you got, like you mentioned, conflict ended. No, it doesn't, right? It's actually a lot of the time it never ends. You now have the alienator in a way actually has a lot more power, because now there's no oversight, right? There's no control. There's like, it's just free range. The alienator can do anything. And now it's even more so for the alienator to say, well, the kids are adult, now they can make their own decision, right? When the kids was younger, that's one of the excuses the alienator does, is to say, oh, you know, the child doesn't want to go to you. So even though it's your time to have the kids, you know, we need to respect the child. So, you know, but now that the kids are adult, you know, they don't even have to say that, because now it's like, okay, there's nothing you can do. So you have a lot of different potential scenarios. There's a scenario where the kids completely disappear from your life, right? And then you have the scenario where the kids still kind of respectfully go and visit you sometime. And then, but, you know, they are very disrespectful, really. They only turn up to you for money. You're basically effectively become an ATM, and because you feel so desperate for the little bit of love and a little bit of connection with your children, that you kind of roll over and let the children kind of, you know, riding all over you, step all over you. And anytime the child asks for some ridiculous amount of money, you try your best to try to accommodate that, thinking that that's a form of love, right? And then you also have a situation where, you know, the child still see you, but and the child is respectful, but still it's kind of cold. And so you have a whole range. It's a spectrum, right? It's not a one particular, like this is not discrete states So it could be anywhere in between. And for each of those situations, there are specific things that you could do. But in general, the principles still apply, which is the same with when the kids are younger. The framework is still this. You need to be a safe, loving, and available parent. Those are the three things. Safe, loving, available. So whatever that you do, you're still going through that screen of filters that you're looking at and go, okay, how do I make this decision so that I am safe, available, loving? Like, how do I come across? How do I communicate these three things to my children by this decision? And so that's the fundamental of it. I guess we could talk more about, the tactics. And, what about your thoughts on this?
No, because I've seen through others that when their kids age out, some of them never see them again.
Right.
Sometimes the alienator is the one that doesn't see him because they find out that the father or the mother that was being alienated is not that bad person. And then you have, okay, and then you have those that want to see you, but they're kind of distant. They're always, there's that separation, that distance between one and the other. And that's what I've seen through people that have gone through this.
And actually, with your personal case, right, you're actually, and that's what you mentioned, is actually a very good scenario where the kids actually then go and live with you instead of the alienator actually leaves the alienator, because sometimes the kids recognize, or sometimes the alienator simply abandon the kids because there's no more child support coming in or whatever, so there's that scenario. So in a way, it's actually one of the best scenario possible, which is the child then go and live with you. But you obviously still see the after effect, the impact, because these children have been affected. So even though they live with you, you probably still. I mean, your personal situation. What do you see?
My personal situation was my alienation was not as grave as many of the others. I saw them every so often. We had problems in certain instances, and it was sometimes when vacations came, when holidays came, that's when I saw the aggressiveness of separation. And mine was they aged out, and they ended up living with me because the mom moved out of town, and they're still in college and they're still going there. So in a way, to me, I'm glad to have that type of experience, because I know that once they finish college, they're going to go on their own, which should be. And so you have that type of bonding that was never there before. And it's kind of difficult sometimes because they didn't really live with you. They just saw you on weekends every so often, every other weekend, if you want to put it that way. So you never had that living togetherness. Understand?
Mm.
So that's what I see on my end, right? But it's everyone is different. Like you said, it's a huge spectrum.
Right.
And I've seen some kids that have grown up, because I teach martial arts for many people that know out there, and I've seen kids that have been severely alienated from their father. Their mom always brings them in. They talk bad about their father, and all of a sudden they're 18 years old, and boom, the mom's by herself now. And 6, 7 years later, I see the mom. They say, "Oh, they left me. The father tricked them and took them away." You were actually the one that was doing this, so far I recall. Doing. So you start seeing stuff like that, and you see that thing, and I see now the recognition of the alienation in others through what they're going through, and it's kind of like an escalation step. I think the younger the kid is, the child is, the by the time it gets aggressive as the longer the separation is. So in other words, if you're like 15, 16 years old and the parents get a divorce, there might be alienation, but it's not as grave. But the younger the child is, 4, 5, 6 years old onward, it's going to escalate very, very quickly. And some people just escalate it very rapidly and very aggressively. And
Because you had a bit more history with the kids. You have a little bit more, yeah. Because when they were younger, it's harder for them to remember, right? And it's easier for them to be manipulated. and you have less of a history for the kids to recall that bonding that you had, right? So it's a little bit different, yeah.
Absolutely. But I see a lot of parents that that the kids age out, and the kids are no longer, and you see that person walking like just like staring out into space. You know, they're there, but they're not there. There's something missing, and that's what I really want to get into to see, because what happens? I know a lot of people that have advocated for this, gone through this, were afraid to stand up because everything else was happening. And a lot of these people now, the kids are aged out. What do I do now? You know, that's what happens.
Right. I think in terms of the systematically, if you look at the framework actually is still the same. So I have a framework that's basically looking at different facets of how to handle the situation, right? So one facet, and it starts with you. How do you handle yourself? So it's the same whether the kids are still children, like minor age, or an adult, is you still have to live your full life. How do you take care of yourself emotionally so that you don't become a burden for your children? Because sometimes you react, you don't recognize that the children are victims, so you react to it, etc., etc. So it starts from you. How do you heal yourself so that you are truly healthy? So that take, whether it's meditation, whether it's therapy, having a network of people that understand you, and that may not be your friends or family, because it's not something that everyone can understand. It's unless you have lived it and experienced it. Sometimes it's very difficult for other people to truly empathize with you. So finding that network of people that understand you from the context of being victims of parental alienation is really important. And so having that kind of support system, and then also still have your full life, meaning focusing on your purpose, what you are there to do. And it's, your life is not just about, your identity is not just being a parent. And yes, that aspect of it is being affected, but in order for you to enforce that aspect, you actually have to make sure other aspect of your life is healthy, eating healthy, physical, whether exercise or, spending time with nature, whether it's traveling or doing your hobby, whether it's artistic or, music or whatever it is, right? Having friends. That's still really important, because if you have that holistic life, then it's much better for you, because you're able to give more to your children. You're able to be more patient and tolerating, and be able to look at what's going on with a better, clearer perspective. So that's the first aspect of it, which is yourself. And then the next aspect of it is to do with how you deal with your children, which we talk about, which is, making sure that all interactions show that you are a safe, loving, available parent. And that doesn't mean that you just say yes to everything. It actually means that, how do you communicate boundaries in a way that's still showing that you are loving, safe, and available. And then it's so important to understand that your children are victims, even though they are adults. Sometimes people think, wow, they're grown now. Why don't they? Well, if they have been brainwashed all their life, and that's all they know, that's what they were raised in, there's no other way for them to see it. A lot of what we are as human beings seeing and believing today is based on whatever we were told. There's a lot of things that we don't know, and we still don't know if it's right or wrong. So just the fact that the kids cross that boundary and become 18, there's nothing magical about that date when the kids become 18. Is they still the same children, and they probably still live in the same roof with the alienator. They're still being brainwashed every day. So you can't just say, well, now the kids are adult, and it's very irresponsible for them to not recognize it. Like, how? So yeah, so to be able to be to have that perspective and recognizing that they are victims, they are still victims, and being patient about that and not react harshly to the children is very important. So having that unconditional love is so difficult sometimes, because love doesn't mean that just loving when it's easy, right? Unconditional love is loving when it's still difficult. So there's that aspect of it, which is how do you handle yourself, how do you handle your children, and then how do you handle the alienator? Well, luckily, once the kids are adult, you actually don't have to handle the alienator anymore because, kids are now adults. You don't have to discuss child support, you don't have to argue. And if the alienator, which they tend to, still want to initiate attack because that's their MO. They want to go and hurt you. They still continue to fight. So lucky for you, you don't have to engage. Just because somebody initiate a fight, you don't have to be, that's that. It's not your fight. It's okay if it's not up to them to accuse you of being a bad parent or anything. You don't actually have to validate that accusation by responding to it. In fact, responding to it actually give it some kind of validation. So, in terms of the alienator, I think it's best to just leave them alone, and you don't have to respond to any email or accusation or interaction. You don't, because the kids are now adult. All the interaction, you can deal directly with the kids. I understand sometimes kids don't want to, so it's kind of challenging, but that's the point of it. You're looking at all these different aspects. And then in terms of the system, again, the system is no longer relevant. You can't go to court now, so that's kind of out of the system. Schooling, the same thing. Kids are now adults, so actually the school won't interact with you directly. The same with doctors, right? So the system is now no longer sort of relevant to you, unfortunately. And then society. Now, society actually is a very important aspect when the kids become adults. So society means friends and neighborhood and church and community and that kind of thing. So research shows that the kids wake up on certain circumstances. And there are, I think, 6 particular scenarios. And 5 of them is to do with situations that happen in their life. Either they themselves become alienated parents, they getting abandoned by the alienator or abused by the alienator and they recognize it, or they're going through, medical serious illness or traumatic situation, etc. So there's a few of those. And then there's one particular one is if somebody else wake them up and say, hey, you should go and check out. Sometimes it's a combination of those, but I think there are 6 scenarios. I don't remember the exact details, but there's a research that have been done by Dr. Amy Baker, so you guys can look that up. We ourselves also have done research on that, so we interview a lot of adult children and ask them how they woke up, and it's the same. It's actually matched really well with that. So, so there's that particular case where I mentioned where if there's somebody else say, hey, your dad or your mom, you should look into that. They are not bad people, like you said, or why aren't you talking to them? Right? So, in order to get into that scenario, it means that how you interact with the community is so important. Live your life fully, and again, it's back to what we talked about earlier. Live your life full of purpose. Live your full life as a good, happy human being, so that people see you as who you are, instead of seeing you as this desperate, emotional, broken, lost half of a human being. Instead of that, just engage in community, live your full life, give as much as you could, that kind of thing, so that someone hopefully will be the advocate for you, to your children, and hopefully that will wake the children up. So I think the framework is still the same. These are different facet that you have to consider separately, and the framework is still the same whether the children are adult or the children are minor age, but it's a little bit different in the specific scenario.
Absolutely. And I know that there's a lot of people that go through this because there's a lot of people that have already been through all this, and that's what I've been noticing with everybody that's there. I start seeing, wait a minute, this is what's happening, and you don't want to be the one telling this is what happened to you or not, but that's, you start realizing, and you start seeing it a lot more now, like you said, if you've gone through it. Once you've gone through it, then you recognize what's happening to somebody else.
Yeah, that's a crazy thing, right? I have done quite a lot of talk where I go into a room and I would ask people, have you heard of parental alienation? And usually the whole room is like, what is that? I never heard of it, right? But then once you describe it and go, Parental alienation is when someone tries to interfere into the relationship between a child and a parent, either by bad mouthing or, et cetera, right? Withholding the child and, create false allegation, moving the child away without permission, adopting the child to the step parent, to change the child's name, withholding school information, all these things, right? And when you start describing it, people are like, oh my God, that's what happened to my brother. That's what happened to me. That's what happened to my sister, my neighbor. Everybody knows somebody. And it becomes such a common thing that people don't even realize that that's the thing. They see the suffering, but we have learned to normalize the suffering, to accept it as if it is the fact of life. No, it's not. It shouldn't be that way. Because as much as you see it as a normal thing, the traumatic damage on the children is really serious. These children, and why are we allowing this? Why are we accepting this as normal? It's not normal at all.
Oh, it's not normal. And but many and I see parents that are still advocates that are still going in there, and their kids are still young, and you see them going through this, and you're like, I was in that place, and I was in this, and this is probably going to happen. You can guess the steps, and sure enough, it continues getting worse.
Right. Yeah. It's and that's the thing too, is because there's such a lack of awareness in general that usually the victims themselves, the parents, the alienated parents themselves, don't even know what they're looking at. And because they don't know what they're looking at, things get worse and worse and worse and worse until one day it's too late. And then they feel like, oh, how did this happen overnight? It didn't happen overnight. It has been a whole process that's been going on, but you didn't know what you're looking at.
Exactly right.
Right. If society would go, oh, this is a thing and it's a bad thing, then parents recognize it, they can start taking actions early on, they can hopefully get other people involved, and sometimes alienators themselves may recognize it and go, okay, this is, it's causing harm to my children. Maybe I will try to back off a little bit and not, putting my child in the middle of the conflict. Well, that's a good situation.
That's the best situation. But what happens usually, and it's a lot of this is egged on into a conflict by the attorneys and the courts. They're the ones that actually adding fuel to the fire.
Well, there's definitely some of that. I'm not saying that it's always the situation. I think, but I definitely have seen that kind of situation because, again, it back to the lack of awareness, right? People don't even recognize that that's a problem. They don't recognize how serious it is, the damage to the children. They're not able to, because parental alienation is very, what would you say? What the term that I want to say, which is counterintuitive. So when you look at something, so for example, you can look at the two parents going to court, and one parent is looking like really emotional, radical, not being able to communicate themselves very well, and just like distraught. And you go, wow, that can't be a good parent. And then the other one looking so confident and articulate, and they go, oh, that must be a good parent. But sometimes it's completely the opposite. In fact, this is a victim that's suffering for the pain and being attacked from, false allegation and withholding the child and not being able to access the child, and all the frustration from all this time that has been built up and not being able to get the child. And then by the time they get to court, they've spent so much money that they couldn't afford, and they probably already have lost their job because of false allegation and all this stuff. So in fact, they actually is a loving and good parent, but yet they come across as this really emotional and erratical parent. And so, yeah, sometimes it's difficult for judges of people in the system to recognize, teachers and doctors. It's difficult for them because, and then the alienator, on the other hand, is winning because, oh my God, I was able to badmouth everyone, and everyone looking at me as a poor victim. I'm such a good parent, right? So now they go to court, they're looking so confident and all that. So the judge go, oh, that must be a good parent. I'm going to grant. So now it's just like a spiral effect, right? So yeah, so sometimes the system, I do see that the system fails sometimes because of the lack of awareness and the the lack of experiences. And then also the other thing about the system is it's like a different country because they speak different language, they have different rules, and parents don't realize that. So you go to a different country, try to speak still your language, still drive the way you drive, and you could be driving on the wrong side of the road. You could be speaking a completely. If that's the problem, is the court system is a completely different country. So in order for it to work for you, you do have to learn the language and the rules and be able so that you can present yourself properly. And sometimes that is done by hiring a lawyer. Sometimes it's really not affordable. And sometimes even hiring a lawyer is not enough. So yeah, so it is challenging. And that's why sometimes it doesn't work because of that. And obviously there's other situations where the system fails so badly, like for example, Cadence law that is now people were trying to push it into all the states. Situation like that, where a law that have good intention by the policymakers, but completely is destructive to children's life. And a lot of people, when they first look at that law, when they don't understand it deeply enough, they will think, oh, what's wrong with it? It seems like a good thing. But once you look at it, you just see, wow, this is terrible. This is gonna really destroy a lot of people. But and that's the problem with the system.
Absolutely. What would you suggest to parents that were in a conflictive situation and they were going through it, their kids now age out? What should they do? In other words, what are the steps that they should be doing now?
Yeah, like I was just talking about the whole framework. That's the point of it. It start from looking at yourself. How do I be the whole person? You cannot pour from an empty cup. So how do I be as full as possible as a human being so that I can be a good parent, and then, look at your interaction with your children. How do I communicate anything in a way that shows that I'm loving, available, and safe? Because if you see the child do something and then you immediately react to it and harshly, you're not communicating yourself as being a safe and loving and available. So how do you react to it in a way, set your boundary in a way that still come across as those things, right? So there's all these things that is important. I think above all of this is not giving up hope, because that drives everything. If you still have hope, then you can still put effort into make sure you live your full life, make sure you be there for your children, you still trying to build a good community around you, right? But if you give up hope, then there's nothing left. So really, that's the most important thing. And the thing is, as much as it feels like that's the end of everything, we have seen over and over where situations turn around like that. You don't even see it coming. So if you give up on yourself, you're actually giving up on your children, because if the moment comes and your children ready to turn around and you're not there because you're emotionally not available, without you, sometimes parents don't even realize that just the way that they are show up as a wall that the children can't pass. So if you don't give up hope so that you can still be everything in the term of all those aspects that I was talking about, then when the moment comes, the child can turn around like that. And we've seen it over and over many times. And usually it's really fast, actually. The turning around, sometimes it's just like that, like overnight. Of course, you're going to still see the impact of it, how the children are. It's still going to take a long time for them to heal. But, I mean, I've seen so many cases now where, it seemed impossible. They think that this will never turn around, and then it just turn around like that. So
Absolutely. That's one thing. As a parent, that you're going through this, or you went there, or you went through this, you can never stop. You have to continue moving forward and fighting for your kids, and at all times. And that's the only thing counsel that I can see tell people, because I've seen a lot of people lose faith in themselves, like you say, and all of a sudden they get swept up under the rug by the system, and that's
right.
just the way. But anything else you'd like to say, Doctor?
I think one of the thing I would also want to add is that Sometimes if you sit there in your sorrow, and it just keep churning, it actually get worse. So if you get out of yourself, and while your situation might be difficult and you're not able to help yourself, but you reach out and help someone else, sometimes it's really going to help you. We're talking about not just karma, where things come back to you, but also there there's a sense of agency, self-agency, where you feel when you just sit there in sorrow, you can feel like you're a powerless and helpless victim. But if you are reaching out and helping other people, it empower you, and then in return, it actually help you have more strength to fight in your own case. So really don't sit alone, not just about for yourself, but reach out there and help other people.
Absolutely. That's a good counsel. Thank you for saying that, because people need to understand that. If sometimes you feel yourself in there, some people, you can lead into vices in drinking, alcoholism, and everything else because you just feel too much sorrow. Go out there and help somebody else. You might recognize that, help somebody else talk them through. I suggest that people should open up. That's something that I should have done a long time ago. Open up support groups and in little areas and get together and do stuff and not really go after badger anybody, but just help each other without badgering the narcissist or the lawyer or the court system. Just help out and just move forward in that, maybe, And I think those support groups need to be done because that there's too many parents that are going through this.
Right, having that network support system of people that understand you, yes, that's so important. Right, it's your
Absolutely.
part, right, your support part, so that you can reach out and you can and focus on, like you said, positivity instead of just like, oh, the system is broken, it's so corrupted. Da, da. Like the more negativity you feed into it, it's just gonna get worse. So focusing on positivity. What can we do? How can we do this? What are the solutions instead of
Absolutely. I want to thank you. We're running out of time. I want to thank you for continuing to do your work and for letting us know about what we can do and others do when they're stuck in these situations, because it's something that needs to be stopped, but I don't think it's going to. I just think that we need to bring more awareness of parental alienation because it's across all dimensions, from the educational system to the judicial system to the penal system. It's all over the place, including the medical system, you know. And
yeah. Thank you
so,
so much.
no, thank you so much. And for you all out there, reach out if something's happening. Reach out to me with Dr. Dieter, and we'll get you some kind of help or some support group someplace that you guys can get together with and move forward, because it's something that affects, more important, your children. And if children don't have a good person that they're looking at, they're gonna feel themselves sour. So you yourselves have to be lifting up and becoming better. So thank you once more. For you all out there, you all stay safe and be safe. God bless you. Thank you.